Hello and welcome into this edition of the Devil Source Postgame show. I'm Sammy Miller alongside Chris Cartman, following ASU's 50-36 loss to number 10 UCLA, dropping the Sun Devils to 3-6 on the season and then 2-4 in conference play. Chris, what were your initial takeaways from today's game?
It was an extremely bad performance by ASU's defense, giving up 400 rushing yards for the first time since 2016 at Arizona. When Arizona didn't even throw the ball in the second half of that game, people will remember that. But Zach Charbonnet, UCLA's leading rusher and the Pac-12's leading rusher, didn't even play on the night, and yet somehow the Bruins ran for 9.6 yards per carry. They had 42 points through the first three quarters. You're not going to win almost any games when that's the case. ASU's offense did a pretty good job of kind of battling and staying in it. After a bad second quarter, they came back. They were able to make it a one-score game there in the fourth quarter, but not being able to get any stops on UCLA's defense and really not being able to stop the run when you know that they're going to run the ball a significant amount of time. And when Zach Charbonnet, UCLA's leading rusher, the Pac-12's leading rusher, didn't even play on the night for unknown reasons, that's pretty embarrassing, all things considered.
And like you mentioned, Chris, the Sun Devils once again struggled with that run game. So what do you think the biggest factors that contributed to that?
Well, they had some injuries, and they had illness. That was, I think, a factor. Omar Norman-Lott tried to go second quarter, took off his pads. He was frustrated. Sean Iguana said that he wasn't able to play to his satisfaction due to feeling sick. We saw Nesta Jade Silvera, another defensive tackle for ASU, didn't go in the second half. But really, there's no excuse for not having better run fits. I feel like they were getting gashed repeatedly, and they didn't have guys where they needed to be on the field. This was, in some ways, Sammy, kind of reminiscent of the Eastern Michigan loss that ASU had when they just didn't have an ability to stop the run. That shouldn't be the case for kind of where they're at this level of development with Robert Rodriguez, the defensive line coach, and then you have Merlin Robertson and Kyle Soley as linebackers, and Donnie Henderson's been around this team for several years. And yeah, Chip Kelly does a really great job at UCLA to scheming to create gaps and creating opportunities, but a lot of it wasn't even that complicated in kind of what they were doing. I just felt like ASU was getting knocked off the ball and was sort of trying to almost like guessing about where they needed to be. And it was about as bad as we've seen in the last 5 or so years. Since Herm Edwards was hired, certainly the worst, I would say, run defense that we've seen from the Sun Devils.
Now, Chris, time and time again throughout this entire season, we see the Sun Devils defense, they're unable to get off the field during those third downs. What are the biggest factors with that?
Yeah, tonight alone, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14. They came into this game 129 out of 131 teams in FBS. Only Colorado and Florida were worse, but then 9 of 11 UCLA third down conversions in this game. You just have no chance to be productive on defense when that's the case. I thought they were pretty good for large stretches on first and second downs, but then they were not able to get clamps. Look, I think ASU blitzed almost not at all again in the first half, especially maybe 1 or 2 times. The soft zone coverages that we've seen this season from Donnie Henderson and the Sun Devils, they haven't worked. Didn't work again tonight. They brought more aggressive sort of pressures later on as the game unfolded, and they didn't do quite as bad, I think. But by that point, a lot of the damage was done. And the reality is that they have to come up with some different strategies for how they're going to approach those third downs, because not being attached to those guys from a coverage standpoint and also not being able to get to the quarterback, who in this case Dorian Thompson-Robinson ran for at least one of those third and very longs, the 3rd and 14, I believe, and has the ability to get outside the pocket and do a lot of damage with his feet, is just in no way, shape, or form working for them. So you can't necessarily change your identity of who you are defensively in the middle of a season. I think that's what they're struggling with. But the execution of what they're doing is really terrible on third downs, and they have to come up with some different strategies.
And shifting our focus to the offensive side of the ball, the Sun Devils had a pretty solid first quarter. Then that second quarter was quiet from their offensive end. And then the second half, they really turned it up a notch, and they were able to fight back in that fourth quarter. So what do you think enabled their offense to, put up a strong fight against this Bruins squad?
Look, it seemed like they were just completely out of the game. All the fans were gone in the stadium, and you were just kind of like, okay, they're just going to play out the rest of this half by the third quarter. And then somehow ASU is, keeps scoring, and then it's a one possession game, like I said. And I'm like, wait a second, ASU's like actually in this game. Sean Aguano's going for 2, and they're converting them. And Trenton Bourguet is completing 78% of his passes and 350 or something yards. You got to hand it to ASU's offense in the face of basically needing to probably score 50-ish points in this game. They really kept pace, and they didn't get mentally down by the circumstances of the situation. Bourguet had the interception in the end zone that effectively ended the game, right? But I think prior to that, they had been doing a really good job. And look, I just think ultimately, since Sean Aguano's taken over the play calling duties, they've made steady progress. Darius Henderson's been out. They haven't probably been quite as effective in the run game as I think they would have liked to have been over these last few weeks. We didn't see like a big rushing performance tonight. It was once again for the second week in a row sort of heavily reliant on the arm of Trenton Bourguet. Sean Aguano and Bourguet both said that they regret some of the things that happened in the second quarter. Bourguet said he missed some throws, which he did, but he completed 78% of his passes. So that's quite excellent overall. You can't really put too much on him. Xavier Valade, I think, only had 1 touch in the second quarter in a game that he was a high utilization player. And Sean Aguano said that he wished that he had some of those series back where he felt like his play calling kept ASU from keeping pace with UCLA.
And like you were just talking about, Trenton Bourguet had a strong game. He was efficient on offense, and also his running back, Xavier Valade, had once again, he continues to show why he is their go-to running back. How do you think those two in particular really help to push this offense moving forward?
Well, you know that Valade is going to get a lot of carries. He entered tonight leading the Pac-12 in rushing attempts, and he was, I think, third or tied for second maybe in rushing yards. Behind Charbonnet, who didn't play tonight, and then Travis Dye for USC. So Valade is going to move up quite a bit after Charbonnet not playing. He's going to be far and away the leader in carries, and he's probably going to be second in rushing yards. Then he had 10 catches, a career high tonight. And basically what happened was a lot of the zone coverages that UCLA was running was moving their linebacker level back, and then Bourguet had that check down underneath throw. Both on the interior and on the perimeter. And that's something that ASU's not done well enough earlier in the season, getting those high-level plus yardage completions that kind of allow you to stay in moving the chains and being manageable second and third down situations. They did that tonight very effectively. Bourguet took what was available. He did it under a lot of duress. There was more UCLA pressures than had been the case in recent weeks. He was hit several times as he threw the ball. He also took several sacks on the night, but he kept battling, and you know that those are two of ASU's most important players kind of moving forward. And the Bruins do that also tonight, and they still really weren't able to do anything to significantly limit either of them.
And now the Sun Devils have put themselves in the position where they have to win out in order to make a bowl. And they're heading up to a pretty chilly place in Pullman, Washington. Now, Chris, it's cold here at Sun Devil Stadium. It's going to be a little bit chillier up in Pullman. So what do you think the Sun Devils are going to have to do to get a win over Washington State?
Yeah, look, I think their defense is been lagging throughout the year, and then it's not gotten better in some key areas that they really need to. Getting off the field, they had some really untimely penalties again today. Corey Bethley, I think he had 2 unsportsmanlike penalties. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work when you're not getting enough points and your defense is not getting enough stops, and then you're giving your opponent those extra drives. They got to be more disciplined. I think their pass protection needs to kind of take a step in the right direction. And then, of course, they have to be better at not getting gashed in the run game. Now, Washington State doesn't have a very good rushing attack, so perhaps that, is an advantage for ASU going into this game. But clearly, with the third down struggles and these other sort of issues that they've had from a disciplinary standpoint, they still have a lot of work to do. And it remains to be seen if they're going to be able to make enough of these changes to be able to get a win in that game and try to fight their way back to having a chance of being 500.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's edition of the Sun Devil Source Postgame Show. I'm Sammy Miller, that's Chris Cartman. But don't you worry, we have a lot of content coming soon to make sure to follow along to sundevilsource.com.